This is the CNC Router Tips Podcast, episode number 19. This is the CNC Router Tips Podcast, a show which answers one question from you, the listener, about CNC router tables, CNC software, hardware, web hosting, and business. I'll help you get started in your CNC hobby or business and help you cut through the confusion.
Today's episode is sponsored by themakersguide.com. The Maker's Guide. Useful tools for makers.
Hello, welcome to another episode of the CNC Router Tips Podcast. I'm your host, Bill Griggs, and today we're here to help you cut through the confusion of owning, operating, or choosing a CNC router table. I'd just like to take a brief moment to thank everyone for listening in to the last few episodes. We've done a series about people who have built businesses around their CNC router tables. You know, a lot of times people ask the question of whether you could build a business around your CNC router table, and I think we've put that to rest. We had some fantastic guests, and I really enjoyed talking with them. But today we're going to get back to what the show is all about, answering your questions about your CNC router table. Today's question comes in from our listener, Chad. So let's get right to it.
Hey, Bill, I wanted to ask you a question. I'm new to VCarve, and I have VCarve Pro 8. And I made a simple project with a few different elements and different toolpaths, but they all use the same bit. And I'm wondering, is there a way to save all the different toolpaths as one file so that I can upload it to my controller just once instead of doing each one individual? Thanks for the help, Chad.
All right, Chad. Thank you for that wonderful question. This toolpath in question comes up quite a bit with folks who are new to doing CNC projects. I've used VCarve Pro for quite a while, so to me, this is one of the things that I just take for granted. But when a newcomer comes along and starts using a new program, every single choice gets more and more confusing and more complicated. So, thankfully, this is one of those things that's really not as bad as it sounds. Now, before I get into the solution, let's talk about the problem a little bit. Okay, so in a typical setup, like I imagine that Chad has, you do your design work in VCarve Pro because that's the software that he mentioned. So you choose your tool bits that you're going to use for each type of cutting that's used in your design. And now in this case, it's fairly simple because Chad says he's using the same bit for all the cuts. But when he's doing, let's just imagine for a minute that he's using a 1/4 inch end mill, which is probably the most commonly used bit with CNC router folks. It seems everybody's got one and they're always using them. So Chad might be doing a pocketing toolpath on one part of his design, where he's removing material to leave a pocket in some particular shape. And you could use that 1/4 inch bit, and it would go in and it would plunge down into the workpiece, and then it would cut away everything that had to go. And so you'd have a pocket toolpath. And you might have some letters that are cut into another part of the project. And that 1/4 inch bit would go down in and it would pocket in those letters. Really, that's, it's just another form of pocketing. It just removes the material wherever the text will be. Well, on another part of the design, you might have a logo of some sort. And there's a variety of ways that this 1/4 inch bit could go in and make that logo happen. You could do a removal of material so that you could put an inlay in there and then cut a separate contrasting piece of material out that would fit exactly into that space that you created. That's one way. You could again cut the design either on the lines that are drawn for it, or outside the lines, or inside the lines for that matter. With a profiling pass, there's fluting toolpaths. There's any number of ways that you could cut out that logo with the 1/4" bit. So, and lastly, after you got all of the design work done, you might want to cut the design out of the board material that it was made in. And so you would do a profile cut around the outside of that material. Now, each one of these profiles cuts, the pocket cuts, the inlay cuts, whatever cuts that you used to do this, each one of these tool paths used the same bit. And being a logical person, you might set each one of these cuts up individually, and you probably should. That just makes sense. So, you'd create one tool path for the pocketing, one for the inlay, one for the design, one for the profile cut. Okay? And then when you're all said and done, you have these 4 or 5 tool paths ready to go, but they're all using the same bit. Now, you can name them whatever you like. Each one of these tool paths can have a different name, different set of characteristics. You can cut them at different speeds. Now, all of that is irrelevant. It's still using the same bit. So it's time to go and get to the machine, and you're deciding you're going to finally do this project. And so you load all these separate tool paths onto your thumb drive, and you take them over to your machine, and you plug it in, and you load them into your controller software, Mach 3 or Linux CNC, whichever you're using. And you run the program. And you have to do this for each one of those tool paths, and that can get old. And if you forget one or you do them in the wrong order, well, it can just get complicated. But VCarve Pro comes to the rescue in this case, because it has functionality built right into the program to help you with this problem. So in the Toolpath tab, after you've created all of these things, and for those who are new to the software, the Toolpath tab is located on the right of the screen, and it flies out so that you can see it whenever you're getting ready to create toolpaths. Well, on that Toolpath tab is a little icon for you to save toolpaths. Okay, so you've already created them. They're all sitting there in a toolpath list. And there's check boxes in front of each one. One might be the profile cut. One might be the pocket cut. Whatever you chose to name them, each one has a little check mark in front of them. So generally what you did was you put a check mark in the box of the toolpath you wanted to use. And that's probably what you've been doing from day one for each one of your toolpaths. But if you notice, at the top of this Toolpath tab is a checkbox that says output all visible toolpaths to one file. If you use that checkbox and select output all visible toolpaths to one file, what VCarve Pro will do is it will take all of the toolpaths that you selected down below, and it'll throw them into one long G-code file, which you save to your disk using the proper post processor, and then, or you save it to your thumb drive, and you take that combined file to your machine, load it in, and run it, and it will run the toolpath from start to finish, all in one operation. No need to sit there babysitting the machine or having to reset the 0 point after your initial setup. It all takes care of it for you. One go, no confusion. It does everything. Now there is a catch. And that catch is that whatever order you selected the toolpaths in, and whatever their order they're displayed on the toolpath list, that is the order that they're going to cut. So if you want an operation to happen later in the process, then you need to move that operation down. And if you want something to happen earlier, you can move it up. There are up and down arrows right next to the toolpath list that allow you to move the selected toolpath up or down. And you can tell that you've selected the toolpath because the letters will be darker than all the others. So when you've done that, you can click the up and down arrows and it'll move it up and down. You get them all in the proper order that you want to cut. And then you go ahead and output them all, output all the visible toolpaths to one file. And that will solve this problem. The methods that I've mentioned up to this point have dealt with any version of VCarve Pro that you might be using, the older versions or whatever. Well, in the latest version of VCarve Pro, VCarve Pro 8, they added a new methodology, and it's called Create a Merged Toolpath. And it does basically the same thing as the the checkbox that I described earlier. But this one takes it a little further because it gives you a lot more control in the order of things. It will allow you to do ordering by selecting several characteristics. And for instance, you can do ordering by selecting one or more ordering approaches to try. And if more than one option is chosen, the option which results in the shortest rapid moves to join up all the toolpaths will be used. So you can select it to go from left to right, or from in a grid, or from top to bottom, or the shortest toolpath. So it may be cutting part of your letters while it's and then move over and cut part of your pocket. Whatever toolpath results in the shortest amount of time to do it. And what's really cool about this is if you were doing several of the same piece on your board, or even several different pieces on your project board, you could get it to concentrate on one part on that board, so that it does all of the cutting for one complete item first before it moves on to cut the other. Or you could let it choose whether it will work on multiple parts at the same time, because there's a checkbox that says merge by part, and if that's selected, it will just merge all the toolpaths in one part and just cut that one part. So there's a lot here to play with, and this is a good example of how this software just keeps getting better and better every iteration that they come out with. Now, before I forget, Chad, there is a second catch. And that second catch is, if you're going to do this where you're going to try and output all the toolpaths to one file, you can only do it this way if all the toolpaths are using the same bit. However, there is another function which allows you to use multiple styles of bits in one toolpath, but that only works if you have an automatic tool changer set up. And if you have an automatic tool changer, you've got probably a very expensive machine that has this functionality built in, because it's not something most machines have. And you need to use a special post processor which will allow that. And usually those are differentiated inside of the post processor drop-down menu as having the words ATC, or the letters ATC in there, and that stands for automatic tool change. So if you've got one of those, you've got the big machine, you can do it. You can use any style bit you want, and it will output them all to one big gigundo file, and that will go ahead and cut your project using whatever bits you have, so it can do your V-carving, your pocketing, your fluting, your engraving, your cutting out, whatever it is with all these different bits. But you have to have an automatic tool changer for that to work. Thanks again, Chad. That was a wonderful question, and I hope that it will be a little less confusing for you the next time you're doing a CNC project. And because your question was featured in this episode, you'll be receiving a free gift. If you'd like to get your question featured on the air, we'll tell you how to do that right after a brief word from our sponsor.
Today's episode is sponsored by The Maker's Guide, creator of the Triple Edge Finder. Get the edge you need, save time and frustration on your CNC project, and make setup a snap. Save time and material. Set up your workpiece on your CNC router table faster than ever. Accurately set your Z-axis height first time, every time. Automatically locate the corner or edge of a workpiece. Reset your starting point in the middle of a program. Quality crafted right here in the USA on US-made CNC machines. Get the edge you need today. Go to www.themakersguide.com/edge. The Maker's Guide. Useful tools for makers.
I often mention many different types of software during the episodes, and hardware and cutters, and it can get a little confusing. So what I did was I put together a page on my website, cncroutertips.com/resources. And on that page, I list all sorts of resources there, from books to tools to software, all the things that I use that make my CNC experience better and easier. And I hope you'll check it out. So again, it's cncroutertips.com/resources. Now, if you'd like to have your question featured on the air, here's how. Need help? Ask me about your CNC router question on my podcast, the CNC Router Tips Podcast. I'll be glad to help or try and get you the help you need. I want this podcast to be a fun and personal experience for everyone, and helpful. So let's keep it real and ask sensible questions. Please use common sense and show courtesy to everyone. That way everybody wins. Here are some guidelines to ensure that your question is qualified to be featured on the show. Please keep your questions under 1 minute in length. If it goes a little over that, that's fine, but don't ramble. If you have a website and URL, you're allowed to share it, but only once during the recording. Spammy or disrespectful or deeply private questions will not be considered for the podcast. If you need to ask more than one question, just make each question a separate voicemail. Thanks again, everyone, for tuning in and listening to the CNC Router Tips podcast. If you'd like to join our free mailing list, you can go to cncroutertips.com. There's a link right there on the top of the page which tells you how to do that. Thank you so much and have a great day.